Hi everyone, welcome back. And if you're new here, hey, I'm Debby. And yes, I just watched season 2 of Severance, so naturally I had these guys on my mind and I did a couple of portraits. I didn't finish Helly yet, but I will. She just was like kind of close to the bottom of the page. And that's what I used, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Inktense pencils. But first, I gotta reset my desk because I've been helping my husband out with flatting his comic and spending a lot of time on a screen. And I'm looking forward to bringing out some more materials and doing this little review video for you guys. And it's finally spring here in Saskatchewan, so I hope you're having a great spring too. We'll do some swatches, I'll show you some techniques, and some examples of how I like to use Inktense pencils. So this is the materials that we're going to be looking at today. I have the set of 36 Inktense pencils, and they are kind of like a dye-based pencil. It's a permanent color, so unlike a watercolor pencil, this does not lift off the page. If you happen to be a fan of these colors, I used iris blue and teal green. I will be doing a little review of the sketchbook that I use. I just want to use it a little bit longer. It's the Strathmore Creative Journal. It's a watercolor sketchbook, and the pages are 90 pounds. And so far, I'm liking it quite a bit. Inktense pencils are water soluble, and you activate them with any kind of paintbrush loaded with water. The less water you use, the more control you'll have and the more kind of concentrated your pigment will maintain. There are loads of colors. I think there are over 100 colors in their pencil range, and I think you can get sets that go up to 100, perhaps a little bit more. They have a set of 72, a set of 36, and I think they have a couple of smaller sets now too. But they're also available open stock. What makes these water-soluble pencils unique is that the color intensity is unlike anything else you've probably used, and that the color is permanent. Derwent says that you can also use these colors on other surfaces. So it says that you can use it on fabric, ceramics, and wood. I haven't tried it on any of those surfaces yet, but if you're interested, maybe I'll make a short. I really am curious how it looks on fabric. You can use it as an ordinary colored pencil, but the real magic happens when you add water, and then the intensity of the color really shines through. It's almost surprising sometimes swatching a little brown swatch that turns into this vibrant golden hue. Because these colors are quite staining, do make sure that you swipe and clean your brush in between swatches, otherwise you will have some color contamination. These colors are very layerable, however I would recommend that you let your surface dry before adding a new layer of color. Less is more when it comes to water, and also you have to be kind of wary on how much pencil you're laying down because it creates quite a lot of pigment once you add water. So if you're layering, you do need to be kind of conscious of maybe what the more powerful color is. Say if you're layering a blue and a yellow, not overdo it with the blue because it'll overtake the color. I really enjoy these pencils, but if I were to make one criticism, it is that the naming convention is sometimes really strange, and I also don't know why they haven't used traditional naming conventions sometimes instead of calling things Shiraz. You know what I mean? What I find particularly annoying is that there's an ink black and an Indian ink, and I think that's very redundant and kind of confusing. Some of my favorite colors are this mustard. If you like quinacridone gold, that's pretty much quinacridone gold, so it's really awesome. I also really like all the dark colors, so like this Ionian green, this iron blue, bark. I mix these ones up, but the Shiraz, this one's Shiraz, I really like that one too, because I've been using it as like little accents here and there, and it seems to have like quite a lot of earth tones, but I think that there's a good range of colors there, some more warm, some more cool. And yeah, I really like the color selection. One of the really cool things about these pencils is that they're blendable, and you definitely need to swatch because the colors look different than the little color at the end there. But once you have your color selected, it's pretty cool how blendable they are. I chose a selection of 3 primaries just to show you what it looks like blending with 2 different colors, and as you can see you get a lot of pigment. I can make a swatch beside the swatch with the excess pigment, so just keep that in mind when you're layering your colors. You really don't need that much. So you can activate the pencil with water on dry paper, but it's actually also really cool to activate it on wet paper. So I'll give you a little demo here. So I will just get a moppy paintbrush, saturate the paper pretty well, and then it'll kind of melt on contact and you get these sort of satisfying inky lines. And you can do that while you're painting into something or as a technique to get started, but this will be a much heavier color load and it'll be less blendable in a way, but it's kind of a fun effect. Let's actually test that out and see how blendable it is if you do that. Yeah, it doesn't blend as well, as you can see. But if you want that kind of heavier textured line, that's one way to go about it. Now, what I've seen some artists do that like to paint with Inktense is that they will go directly onto the pencil tip and load the paintbrush that way. And then you get more of a painted effect without the little lines and the little kind of residue that you would get if you're going on dry. So that's an option there. And that's more like using the pencil as a palette. Another technique I've seen people use is a textured palette. I don't have one of those, but I think a textured chopping block would work just as well. I have this like IKEA desk protector thing, and it's actually kind of textured. So I'm going to try going on here. And the idea is that you scratch off some color and then you use the chopping block or the textured palette as a palette, basically. And you have a very similar effect to going directly with the pencil. It might actually be smoother that way if you want to paint with it. But whatever surface you're going to use as a palette, it's going to get stained because this is ink. So just know that in advance. I don't mind. This is just to protect my desk. Now, something I've never tried and looks kind of fun. I've seen some people use it to splatter, to do like splatter effects. So let's give that a try. Oh, that works really well, actually. Okay, that could be really fun. If you want some texture or some, I don't know, whatever you want to do with it, but that works really well, actually. It will get your pencil all messy. So you're going to want to clean that up. And if that bothers you, just keep that in mind. Now I had just done a swatch here just to show you that you can build up the intensity of color. So if you let that dry, and the key thing is to let it dry, because if you don't let it dry, you'll leave marks. The pencil marks will stay on the paper, similar to what we got over here. It doesn't really blend, right? So if you let the paper dry and then go in with your second layer, you can build up the intensity of the color. Oh, see, it's a little bit wet there, so that's not going to blend very well. But you can see how you just get more color. And so you could do gradients that way, or just build up intensity in a certain spot. So the color is buildable, and that's pretty great. So there's some ideas on how you can use it with like different tools, or wet or dry. Yeah, it's pretty versatile, and what I really like about it is just the pigment load itself. It's just so intense. Inktense. Anyhow, I'll show you some examples of the stuff that I do with it, and I'll have all of these things scanned and posted on my blog after the video goes up. So I'm just pulling out some examples of things that I've done with Inktense in the past and the way that I like to use them. And I got this set from my husband about 5 or 6 years ago as a Christmas present. And I did originally film a video back then, but the footage got lost, so it never came to be. But this is some of the stuff that I did in that video. So another little swatch card. And I tried my hand at doing a more traditional kind of study painting, just to see how far you can take it. I think you could take it a little bit further than this, but my paper kind of gave out on me, because this is a quite inexpensive watercolor sketchbook. I think it's the Canson XL, and I kind of pushed it to its limits. But you could keep going with that layering, and if you like this sort of painting style, this more representational painting, there's an artist here on YouTube called Lachri. I will link her in the description, and she does the art for the new Inktense bundles, actually. And she has a lot of tutorials on how to paint in this style. These were just some little tests. So this is like a one-pass sketchy test, which is like really the way that I like to use them in my sketchbook. And then this was just using different kind of outlines. So that's using a micron pen. That one is a waterproof pen. And this is using the Inktense outliner, which is that one pen that doesn't really blend away, one pencil, sorry, and it gives you more of a graphite feel. If you layer on top with a lot of color, it'll eventually disappear, but you can also like have a graphite-like look if you want. This was using the Inktense blue as outline, and this was using water-soluble graphite pencil. And those ones will bleed and blend into a painting. And then this was just how much can I layer up. So this is after several layers, the color intensity gets quite a lot more intense versus just the one pass down there. And that's the color palette that I used for that. So maybe that is useful to you guys. And last summer, I think it was, I joined Katie Moodie's Patreon for a couple of months to do her live streams. She does these cool little live streams with timed themed photos. So the one that I did was owls. So I got a bunch of owl references to work from, and then they were timed drawings. So a lot of them were 10-minute time drawings. And this was the palette that I curated for myself for the sketchbook session. And those are the Inktense pencils there that I used, as well as some other materials, watercolor, neocolor, and some watercolor pencils. And so this is it in a mixed media style. And I'd say this one probably has the most Inktense pencils, and you can see that the intensity of color is quite strong. And yeah, I just layered that with watercolor and Inktense, and they play very nicely together. And I really like that kind of like sketchy way that the color blends into the watercolor and sort of disappears here and there. But you can also get these kind of like scratchier, kind of more inky lines, which if you like is an awesome thing. So that's using it in a quick sketch style. And this is mixed media paper. It is a very porous mixed media paper, so it absorbs deeply into the paper, and not like, say, this cellulose watercolor paper, which keeps things on the surface of the paper. So I really like mixed media paper that is like this for that purpose. Not all paper is as porous, let's say. but that's my favorite paper. And unfortunately, it is from Germany. That's the paper there. If you are familiar with this paper and know a comparable paper, let me know because it's like my favorite. And then, of course, I did these series of portraits, just using it as a pencil, basically. But because it doesn't erase, you kind of get the same effect that you would using a ballpoint pen. And I know that ballpoint pen drawing has become very popular as of late. And you'll get the same effect because you can't erase, but you'll have the texture of a pencil. So if that's attractive to you, keep that in mind. The only thing that I would say to be wary about is that the water actually seals the Inktense into the paper. So if it hasn't had any water on top of it, it is still transferable. So you can see here that I have some transfer from there. I scanned these drawings so that they wouldn't get too wrecked, or I'd have a copy. But you might have to seal it so that you don't have that if you want to use them that way. I initially intended to do this sort of thing and just do a drawing that is meant for the painting, but then I got carried away with the rendering. But it was a good experiment to see if you could actually render with them, and you totally can. But I think I would use it more in this fashion as an underdrawing for a painting. And although I haven't tested this out yet, I really think that this could be a very useful combination. So this is an ink-based pencil, and these are fluid inks. These are acrylic inks. Now, there's a lot of companies that make different acrylic ink colors. Some of the benefits of using acrylic ink is that the color is more consistent than, say, a watercolor. I think that those could possibly be really good play partners. A few years ago, I think it was, I took part in BirbFest, and I did sort of like this nature journal kind of thing. And I used the Inktense as little accents for the drawings. So the underdrawing was actually done with the Faber-Castell Polychromos in green gold, because I'm obsessed with this color. I think you could alternatively use an Inktense pencil, but I was just into that at the time. And I just sort of like used it to accent, and it might be hard to see, but there's some like inky layered lines here and there, and I used it kind of as a finishing touch, just to add some texture and some color into some of the darker areas, especially on the bark there. So that's kind of another mixed media way. And actually, when I was using that, I dipped my pencil tip into water, and that's how I laid it on. So that's another way you can use it, but just be wary that, you know, if you get your pencil too wet, it could be damaging. And then my most recent experiments have been just doing little thumbnails like this, quick little thumbnails. And I think that this is really the way that I'll be using it the most. For my purposes, using it like this for thumbnails and accenting in mixed media is really the way that I'm going to be using them, because it just suits me that way. And I think it's really great for quick kind of color comps, because you can get that done really quickly. And I would say if you limit your colors to like 2 or 3 colors, it's much more effective and much quicker and serves its purpose better. But I think that that's a really great use of it for thumbnailing and planning larger projects, maybe. I will mention that something that is very popular recently and may also be in your arsenal of art equipment, or something you're thinking about, the Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2s, I would say, is a very similar kind of product, but the experience of drawing with it is very different. So this, it feels more like a crayon or a pastel. So if you enjoy the payload, the color payload of a Neocolor 2, but you don't enjoy drawing with a crayon, then this might be a good alternative. They're not as creamy naturally, but you get a very similar kind of textured line. So that's with the Neocolor 2s. And I think you can get a very similar kind of experience in a pencil form, if that suits you better. And I'd say this is a better alternative to a watercolor pencil. just because the color is much more vibrant, if you want that sort of thing. Just to let you know, these are also available as blocks, and if you want to use it more like a palette, you can just get solid blocks of these colors. But I do think that the Inktense pencils are much more versatile. If you just had 3 or 4 colors and a water brush, that's an amazing travel kit, because you have paint and a drawing tool, and it's so portable. There's nothing messy about it. One more thing I'd like to mention is that these kits are quite expensive. They do sell a smaller one now, I think a 12 color or 6 color. If the colors in those sets don't appeal to you, I would recommend just picking up 2 or 3 colors that you think you would use and giving them a shot just to experiment. Here in Canada, they cost about $4 a piece. So they're not cheap, but not too expensive. And I think that when you're testing a new product, it's nice to see if you like the experience before you invest in something big like that. And I think also buying them open stock is kind of a nice way to curate your own colors. I personally really like the colors selection in this set, but if it doesn't appeal to you, buying them open stock is a great choice. And it does play nicely on a lot of different paper surfaces. So this is a watercolor pad. This is multimedia paper with a little bit of tooth. This is the Art Creation Sketchbook, and it's a smooth mixed media paper. This is another watercolor paper with a bit of a smoother texture. And so, yeah, it plays really well on a lot of surfaces. Anyhow, guys, I hope that this was informative to you, and I hope that this is useful in selecting your future art tools or finding new ways of using your Inktense pencils if you have them already. Thanks for joining me, everyone. I hope to see you soon at the next one, and have an awesome day. Bye!